Welcome to Full Speed Ahead. I'm Craig Fuller here with Earnest Sweat, a founding board member of Black VC, also an associate partner at Great Point Ventures. Ernest, how are things in San Francisco?
Things are relatively well here. We've been in quarantine for, I can't even tell how many days now, but given the circumstances, macro events that are happening, me, my wife, and my son, we're doing pretty well here.
That's good. Now where do you live? And I mean, you and I know each other at Prologis Ventures in San Francisco, one of the coolest offices, I'll argue, in all of venture. But I'm curious where you actually reside inside the city or outside the city.
Yeah, so I'm actually in a really far west area called the Richmond District, and it's historically known to be pretty residential, a lot of families, and a lot of nature. So we're really close to Golden Gate Park, a neighborhood called Seacliff that's right next to Baker's Beach, and the Presidio. So during this time, it's been good to, when doing calls, taking walks and getting to see nature, and not just a lot of buildings where we used to live near downtown.
Now, are you getting accosted if you don't have masks on in San Francisco? Do you get sort of the stink eye if you're not wearing them?
Well, I can neither confirm nor deny if I'm the person that's giving a stink eye if someone doesn't have a mask on. Surprisingly, the acoustics work pretty well when you're on a call and you have a mask still. So, thanks to technology, there's no muffling.
So Tennessee has not had the level of response or level of discipline around masks that they have in other cities. But I'm pretty sensitive about it. When I go into a place they're not fully protected, it's something I notice. But I obviously, when I hear talk about masks, I think everybody's sort of fatigued with COVID. What we're talking about is a much bigger issue, Ernest, that's really been impacting not only the venture cycle and the venture business, but just the broader state of our country, and that is racial issues, racial tension, systemic racism, as has been described. And I wanted to get your perspective as a member of the VC community, a community that is largely progressive as it comes to politics and thinking about the future, but still a very, very an environment where there isn't a lot of minority representation.
Yeah. So I think, after the murder of George Floyd, and just a lot of the protests from the Black Lives Matter movement, we've seen that all industries have taken some time to just self-reflect. We know that these issues of racism and socioeconomic access to capital and opportunity, they're multi-pronged problems, and not just one solution is going to solve everything. But I think collectively industries have seen, how are we represented right now? And does that reflect what the country looks like and what the country will continue to look like in the next couple of decades? And so within venture capital, you look at it, it's a very small industry with, I've heard some reports when I was first trying to break in that there's only about 3,000 jobs. It's like trying to get a professional baseball gig, right? And even though it's a very small number of individuals, it usually has an outsized impact on the future of innovation, the future of commerce, the future of business and what it looks like. And historically, it's only been primarily white male dominated. And you can start to see the indirect results of lack of access to capital to other types of entrepreneurs of different demographics. And so with statistics like 80% of firms don't have at least one Black investor professional, and that's looking at all levels from kind of analyst to general partner. And then when you look at general partner roles, it's estimated that it may be 1% is from African descent investors. You see where kind of the disconnect can be when you look at the founders and which founders are getting funded. And so about 3 years ago, 6 investors, all in different points in their career, all Black investors, we decided to create an organization called Black VC with the goals of building a strong community and platform and space for those who are in the industry to knowledge share and how to navigate their careers and progress and become more general partners, as well as to be a space to help individuals who are interested in getting into venture capital. So we've been doing that for 3 years and have seen massive growth. And we have 4 chapters, about 300 investors, ranging from angels to corporate VCs that are within our community. And when everything has happened this year, we've been a space for people to come to learn about resources for hiring diverse talent in your portfolio companies, as well as hiring in venture capital space.
Now, when you mentioned the 300 investors that are a part of the Black VC organization, are those, are you actually investing capital as part of it, or is it an organization to talk about how to involve the broader venture community?
Yeah, that's a great question. So look at us as an organization that helps foster that community, as well as helping the venture community become more diverse. We are not a fund, but we're an organization that runs programming, both lessons and how to train future investors or get further training, whether it's in how to navigate a term sheet, how to get promoted in your company, how to raise your own fund. So these are the things that we kind of run, and then we also involve other members within the stakeholder or different stakeholders within the ecosystem of entrepreneurship relative to the different regions we're in. So, our LA cohort and committee has held events with, entertainers and athletes who are interested in becoming limited partners in funds, as well as how they're looking to build out their own funds to provide capital to more, minority entrepreneurs. So look at it as a training ground and organization that helps other venture firms and the entire community become more diverse.
Now, Ernest, you and I met when you were at Prologis Ventures, which invest predominantly in logistics and real estate, warehousing investments and startups. Transportation's also plagued with a lot of issues around diversity, particularly in African American leadership, and frankly, of any color. It's still a very white-dominated industry. But I'm curious, as it relates to what you saw in both freight transportation and in venture capital, why are both of those industries very dominant white, and why don't we see more progression from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, looking at all the industries I've been involved in, starting my career in investment banking, and then working. We met through Prologis, and when you think about Prologis, even real estate has a similar problem. And so, I think it comes down to, and a lot of these hiring managers and firms really just invest in their own communities, right? And they only invest in the people that they work with before, and they haven't tried to reach out to broaden their network. There's always said in all these different industries that there's a pipeline problem. I don't really think there is a pipeline problem. There's a lot of talented, diverse, Black and brown engineers, logistics professionals, investment bankers, and just pure business athletes that can apply to all these different industries. But usually there's a silo when it comes to who's doing the hiring and where they look. So organizations like Black VC, we try to serve, just like our job as venture capitalists, as those human marketplaces the center of those marketplaces to connect different communities. Just like I would provide a lead to a portfolio company, I believe a lot of venture capitalists should do the same with going to their portfolio companies and saying, hey, here are some resources. Here are organizations that know all the top Black product managers or emerging Black engineers. And here's a resource for you guys to tap into that you haven't done before. So I think a lot of that, I don't think it's necessarily hard. I think it just takes work in connecting with desperate, not desperate, but different networks.
Yeah, it struck me, it was interesting, a couple of weeks ago when the George Floyd murder took place, it was this process for me personally, as someone who's never had to face any type of, I've had, not only am I, a white executive educated, had the opportunity, but I also came from a very affluent family, which sort of instantly gave me status. And I, as a CEO of the company, trying to reflect on what was happening, it was very difficult because I almost felt hypocritical. Is how do I talk about this topic in an organization where we haven't been as progressive as we should? Now, we wanted to, we've aspired to, but we never set goals to actually go out and target the African American community and other communities of color. And I just felt like it was very difficult as a CEO to sort of have any authority to my staff to come out and say, this is what we're doing. It took me a few days to sort of gather how this issue really, how we should move forward. I'm curious, when you talk to portfolio companies or you talk to companies and other founders, how do you get them to think about recruiting folks of color into their organizations and into their management teams?
Yeah, so to the credit of a lot of the founders that I'm associated with, either former portfolio companies or current, a lot of them have reached out to me and said, hey, I'm trying to assess how can I, really make change. And that's been really awesome of an experience. And I think a lot of people realize that, it's just become more glaring that, oh, well, we are missing the mark on this. So I think the first piece that you mentioned, of even, analyzing that and not being afraid to set metrics and targets, even if they're stretch goals. But it just takes that extra effort to then get out there. And yes, you have to search, like I said, when you historically have been, investing in talent and recruitment in maybe 3 schools and that's it, you probably have tapped out that market of getting access to new types of talent. So you're going to have to get out there. And so ways in which we've looked to help, I mentioned there's organizations that focus on different functions. But then technology companies also have, ways in which they can help. Sometimes their own technology can be an approach to solving the problem in a different way. And you have to assess as your company, is there a way you can use your platform, if you're a media company, to create awareness like you're doing, or if you're a data company, is there a way that you could help municipalities, provide more transparency? So we've pushed companies to just even take that look, even if it's something that's not a short-term solution, it's more long-term, even having them think about that. And that's the thing we all have to think. I push my generation and then the generation under me, and even Gen Xers as well, is we've seen in our lives all of this like on demand, microwaves and on-demand TV, and we're just accustomed to things happening fast and when we want it. What we're embarking in with these uncomfortable conversations is growth, and we're talking about lifetime work, which means you might not see the progress, but your children or grandchildren might, and that shouldn't stop you from doing it. So many people are trying to rush, and in the business we're in startups and VC, it's a momentum business. And so people want to really hurry and get out a statement or get out initiatives without taking the time. And it's fine if you thought about it and you are passionate and committed to what you want to do. Yeah. But if you also take some time and then be thorough about what you want to accomplish and what metrics you want to track, that's good too. Like I tell people, inequality is not going to be over in 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years or 2 decades. This is real work that we need to continue to stagger and push forward. And then we'll have another moment of, each company will be reevaluating what they've done and what they can do better.
Yeah, I mean, these issues are thousands of years in the making, and certainly even in our recent history, American history, we're talking about a couple hundred years. As you mentioned, it's multi-generational. It was interesting, you mentioned something earlier, talking about the fact that people tend to recruit from the network. It's certainly true here at FreightWaves. We came to the community in Chattanooga and recruited folks that had experience in transportation, and this community is certainly made a lot of strides in terms of progressivism, but still there's a lot of work to be done. I know that growing up in the South, and you're also from the South, is that, I was a student of the 80s and 90s, and race was certainly a topic, but it was also something that was very uncomfortable for the teachers to address. It was a very touchy subject. When you went into HR training early in my career, I was told, race is a no-go, stay away from it. And it's interesting because now we can actually have these conversations without it being judged, and we're seeing people talk about it and have conversations. And as you mentioned, people reach out to Black VC and say, hey, how can I help? And I think it's the same thing for me, as I reach out to folks in the community and say, why is it that Chattanooga has 60 to 70,000 African Americans in the community, and yet we are not getting a lot of Black applicants into the organization? And it strikes me that we here at FreightWaves and our other organizations have to do a much better job of actually reaching out to that community. It has to be intentional. It can't be just waiting for resumes to fly by.
Yeah, and I think, particularly with you guys in Tennessee, there's so many historical Black colleges, right? And so being able to just even connect with those schools and seeing, who's going through relevant programming, and maybe there's an internship opportunity as well. So there's some ways to really think about it. And I think as companies, you really need to focus, okay, where in the pipeline do you want to work? I can't take credit from this. A friend actually came up with this idea. So many times people talk about, it's a pipeline issue, it's a pipeline issue. That's debatable on how, if it's really a pipeline issue or more of a, like I've been mentioning, a connection issue and connecting to that pipeline. But one thing that he really kind of broke my brain on was saying that we should focus on not it's a pipeline problem, but deplete the supply. Let's make sure with the supply that's there, let's deplete it and get everyone matched and everyone into the optimal company, and focus on that first. And then once we're out, like we've seen in shortages of like truckers and warehouse workers and all these other industries, let's get a shortage of Black and brown professionals in their respective field. And we'll work on.
Ernest, the pipeline thing, someone who's a very metric-driven executive, I've ran sales teams. Sales teams obviously are a core part of any business. Whether it's a pipeline issue, if a salesperson were to come to me and said they didn't hit their numbers because of a pipeline issue, I would tell them to work harder and solve that problem. That's simply an excuse, and it's a convenient one. It's one that I probably myself have thought through when we talk about this minority issue. And I've heard it from Black leaders in the community here in town, that there's an issue in Chattanooga of folks going to Atlanta or going to other cities because the environment is more progressive for them. And it struck me as that's ridiculous. There's a very large educated African American population in this metro area and throughout the South. And if we're not hitting our goals of diversity, then we need to work harder. That's bullshit in my mind, and it's a convenient excuse for someone like me to use in my own mind because it absolves me from any responsibilities or any effort. And one thing that we're doing is actually taking steps, and it's a process. It's not overnight, as you mentioned. This is going to take generations for it to to sort of manifest itself through. But I certainly think that having the conversation is important. What can Black VC do for folks that are in freight tech, perhaps founders that are looking to get involved or think about how do they add progressive elements to their business and minority inclusion campaigns, or potentially we have a lot of VCs that watch this show. What can VCs do in terms of getting involved?
Yeah, they can reach out to, we have a lot of information on our website. So it's Black VCs without the A, so BLCKVC.com. And we have a number of resources and resource pages of organizations that can help with various issues on your pipeline. If you're a VC and looking to actually bring on diverse talent but don't know where to start, you can reach out to us. We also have, at our there's information on how to connect with each of us, or people can connect to me directly. I'm always open for that and having conversations. So people can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn, Earnest Sweat, both is Earnest Sweat. There's only 2 Earnest Sweats on LinkedIn. One is an older guy, that's my dad, and me, so just pick me.
That's awesome. Ernest, I want to talk a little bit before we get your thoughts on the broader environment. You've had a lot of experience in the real estate market and in freight, being at Prologis and now in your current fund. What is your thoughts around the commercial real estate market with everything going on? Are we gonna see a real big impact, or?
Yeah, that's the question I've been really pondering, and with a lot of industries, I've been just trying to overall kind of as a background. Since this quarantine has happened, I've been thinking, okay, this is a black swan event. And typically during recessions, if you look at previous recessions, venture capitalists have made some really good bets if they were able to filter what was a reactionary kind of trend and what's a long-term trend. And so you want to be a part of the long-term wave and pick it early. And usually these events help open this kind of the door for those type of investments. And so within commercial real estate, that's a really hard one. It seems like tools should have been built we need just more flexibility, right? And even thinking of with warehouses and kind of the flexibility and how they typically ran, you get in for 3 to 7 years and you just hold it. That's not going to work in the future. And so when I was at Prologis, saw types of companies, Flex, who had a flexible model of warehousing, thinking of like it as like an Airbnb for warehousing. Those models are going to be really successful in the future. So when you think about other commercial real estate, like office and retail, because there's going to be some real transformation. And so, when I think about when people are going back to work, it's varied in different parts of the country. But, even me, I'm not so sure when I'm going to be going 5 or 4 days a week again in the near future. And so you're going to have different models that work with people's even willingness to be in that office setting again. And so what is that? Is it management of, when people come in, our office is looking like modular places in which like, okay, I have a big meeting of 20 people, or I only need a desk. It's a kind of a spin on co-working, I guess, is probably something that's going to happen, but not as infrequent and with some kind of like bottom. If a recession comes, that kind of like WeWork probably should have built something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have not been coming to the office every day. I'm basically coming in for filming is the only reason. And really what we've tried to do, because our film crew and the production crew has to be here. They don't have a choice because obviously the equipment and the control rooms and all the technology's here. So they have to come in, and we've tried to do everything we can to protect them. But every time I come in, I feel like the mask Nazi and the space Nazi, like measuring, are they really 6 feet? I've yelled at 3 people this morning already here in the office for not following proper protocol. But now what happened, someone came in, one of our younger folks came in earlier to film, and he didn't have his mask on, and one of the other persons sort of motioned to him like, Craig's here, and I saw him sort of like casually walk out the building so he didn't get busted. It's like, I know what you're doing. But it is interesting. You have a young, we've talked a little bit about the fact that you have a 2-year-old. For me, having a 1-year-old, I get to spend time with him in ways that I didn't actually get to enjoy my 9-year-old and 13-year-old. It's a different environment being around them. So that's been nice. But I do, coming back into the office is nice. It's sort of, it's nice to sort of see faces and have conversations about common things. I think people are probably starting to miss that. I certainly am.
Yeah, and I think that's like what you're getting at is what is this term is overused in VC, but what does future of work look like, right? How does collaboration work? And so, right now we have 2 different types of collaboration kind of spectrums. One is like Slack, where it's like, okay, you get in there when you need to, and you can kind of review, and you don't both people or teams don't have to meet together. It's just kind of like, okay, random communication. And then there's all the virtual platforms like Skype or like Zoom, and you have to be attentive and at the same time. And so people are thinking about, is there collaboration in the middle where you can optimize people's time but still have that real time kind of like, oh, I got all the context that Craig is giving me right now because I can see his mannerisms, I can hear his tone and all that stuff. So I think there's going to be a lot of different collaboration tools that come out of this. The thing is, though, you need to be within this environment, you need to be like dead on, like what is the market and what's the pain point? Because nice to haves won't be, they don't produce the ROI that enterprises are looking for until we're back to a frothy market.
Yeah, it's like the old vitamin medicine analogy or chemo versus, and so it certainly strikes me as something that is apparent. A lot of freight people tune into this particular show and network. I'm curious, you've spent a number of years in freight. You're probably also looking at logistics technology in your new role at the new fund. What's your sentiment on supply chain and freight technology? What's hot, what's not?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot out there and a lot of opportunity. I know we've had a lot of, it became a sexy industry over the last 5 years, but there's still a lot of problems that need to be solved. And so I think continuing within freight and transportation within the supply chain, we still need to see the industry become more streamlined, because there's so many stakeholders, and within your supply chain it's becoming more and more and more complex, especially if we put in, looking at fixed assets becoming more flexible for stakeholders. So, I continue to still look for what are data plays within different parts of the value chain that can streamline people's processes, that can make things much easier for people to flex up and down their supply chains, whether that's within automation, whether that's in still visibility of where your freight is. I think there's still so much that can be done, and there likely will probably be a lot more consolidation that happen. But at this point, I still feel that it's probably going to happen more from large growth companies, so still relatively younger companies, 10 years and younger, that'll be doing that, then doesn't feel like the appetite of kind of our legacy players has been to buy things yet. Because especially in this market, they're trying to figure out, okay, how do I survive in this industry? And so for them, using a lot of capital and dry powder on their balance sheet to buy something may not be the way, but I do think it's accelerated the adoption of technology from a lot of these players. So that's a lot of stuff I'm looking at. I think a lot of the areas that we've invested in already, especially even with like the brokerages and digital brokerages and stuff, I think I wouldn't be too excited in looking in that anymore, because I think a lot of players are out there. And I think they've also inspired the legacy players to take a lot of their technology as well. So I think that's maturing, and that's not as exciting in how we can really get to a streamlined supply chain that can be truly dynamic. So like the whole idea, even when I was at Prologis and even now, when it comes to logistics, is how do we get to a demand chain? And so I'm interested to always talk to people who are thinking about that.
Yeah, Ernest, I hate to put you on the spot. Actually, I don't hate it. I love it. I need you to make a bold call. Next 5 years, make a bold call. What is going to be hot or what not? Just make a bold call. I want you to put it down here now.
Bold call. Does that have to be in supply chain or anything?
No, it could be broadly, but I want you to make a big prediction that I'm going to hold you to for 5 years.
Yeah, I think my bold call is that the percentage of remote and distributed teams will only be 1 or 2% more than it is pre-COVID, so 2019.
That's you're pretty negative on distributed teams long term, huh?
I think it works for some teams. Like you'll talk about historically, like Zapier, they've been distributed, but like I think, a core tool in business is teams, and there's so much that you get from being near teams. And then when I also think about this idea of work-life balance, it's melded together in this. And until we're able to build tools, if we're going to commit to that, this new life, truly, which I don't think we will. I think people will start to get more back to like, okay, what's the in work? Instead of like looking at your work from home policy, there'll be what's your in work policy. I still think that'll be like 50%, and key meetings will still happen in person. But I do think that everybody just working from home, I don't think that's going to be a thing, especially with larger. Now, I do think travel and budgets will stay down because people realize like I don't need to travel all the time for this stuff.
Yeah, we've saved over $100,000 a month by not being in the office. And it's travel, it's it's entertainment, it's company lunches, it's all of that just spontaneous stuff that you probably don't even need, frankly. That you end up spending. So, Ernest, appreciate your time today. Really have enjoyed our relationship over the last couple of years and your support when you were at Prologis and also staying in touch. Wish you the best of luck with Black VC. You can reach out to Black VC on the website. Ernest, give us that website one more time. Yes, it's BLCKVC.com. Got it. So reach out to Earnest. He is the man. He's a great guy. It looks like we missed the clock. So that's all right. We're right there. Earnest, appreciate you coming in today. And if you are interested in more FreightWaves content, we've got an awesome set of virtual experiences coming up through the rest of the year. Now, we're not going to be in person. The FreightWaves events are unfortunately not happening in person, but that doesn't mean that you are going to miss out on this awesome, explosive content or the networking with others. We've set this up so that the virtual experience as engaging as it possibly could be. So tune in to the next virtual event is on July 21st at the 3PL Summit. We've got a number of other conferences or events, virtual events coming up the rest of the year. So look at the schedule, check it out, lots of great subjects. We're even diving into some of the more nuanced parts of logistics. One that I am particularly excited about is SpaceWaves coming up this December. We're going to talk about the intersection of space and logistics, and we can only do this in a virtual environment. My board would shoot me if I came to them, probably fire me, more likely, if I came to them and said I wanted to do a space event in person. But with virtual, we can bring it all to you.